Hey, hi, and welcome to today's Social Science Data Lab on Survey Mastery, a deep dive into SQP 3.0 to enhance questionnaire development by Lydia Repke. The Social Science Data Lab is an event series at the Mannheim Center for European Social Research that provides a platform for researchers to present tools and methods for the collection, management, analysis, and visualization of data in the social sciences. Our speaker, Lydia, is a senior researcher and the head of the team Scale Development and Documentation at the Department of Survey Design and Methodology at GESIS, Leibniz Institute for the Social Sciences. The research focuses on survey design, data quality, social networks, acculturation, and multiculturalism. She is also a member of the Young Academy of the Academy of Sciences and Literature Minds. In this workshop, Lydia will introduce you to the Survey Quality Predictor, SQP, an open access web-based program that predicts the quality of survey questions based on their linguistic and formal characteristics and can help researchers to develop their questionnaire. Just some housekeeping, we are, as always, recording this workshop in active speaker mode, so the audio from on-site and remote attendees will be recorded. And if your video is on while asking a question online, your video will be recorded as well. So yeah, we're very happy to have you here, Lydia. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Alex. So also welcome from my side. I'm very happy to be here, and I have no idea who's online there, but also welcome to you online. Yeah, what I want to do is I want to take you on a deep dive into the world of SQP because I think it's a very practical, hands-on tool that could be very useful eventually for you if you're working on surveys and want to develop maybe questionnaires. I organize it in a way that more or less the first half I will be like giving a lecture like talk, and then the second half, I see you don't have computers, but it's also not a problem. I wanted to go into the software, but for those of you maybe online, you can follow in the software directly if you want to. Anyway, so it will be those two parts, a little bit lecture and a little bit hands-on, but feel free to interrupt me at any point if you have questions.
I need to click on the screen with the mouse once. I'm going to show you.
Okay, so yes, you're still in the right workshop. Some people say that designing questionnaires is an art and that you need a lot of expertise and experience in order to come up with good questions. Then there are other people that think designing questions is very easy. At least sometimes I have the feeling when I read bad questions that are out there as well. And maybe to make this a little bit of a more scientific task, the Survey Quality Predictor was developed as a hands-on tool that is based on empirical evidence and that you do not necessarily need these experts. They're still very useful, but I mean, this software can guide you in creating also good questions yourself. Maybe reflect for a moment on the different types of decisions that you potentially could take when designing a survey item. Yeah, one thing is that you have in mind what you want to measure ideally. Yeah, not everybody has this in mind. Some people just come up with questions, but let's assume you already have in mind what you want to measure. And you have a question like this one here, which is from the European Social Survey. On the whole, how satisfied are you with the present state of the economy in country XYZ? Still use this card. And then you have a response scale of 0, extremely dissatisfying, ranging to 10, extremely satisfied. Seems like a simple question, but there are so many decisions that maybe consciously or unconsciously have been taken when designing this item. One thing could relate to the question whether you wanted to add an interviewer instruction in the case of a face-to-face interview, for example. In this case, the ESS always puts the interviewer instructions here in bold letters. Or do you want a respondent instruction, which you have here? Right? Still use this card as an information to the respondent what to do. You could have maybe formulated this item in a way that it's part of an item battery, being the second, third, fourth, or whatever statement that is being evaluated on that scale. You could have formulated it in a balanced way. So instead of saying, How satisfied are you? You could have said, how satisfied or dissatisfied are you? Yeah, so there's a question of, am I designing my item to be balanced or unbalanced? And these ones maybe are not very like conscious decisions, but also the number of words, nouns, abstract nouns, the number of like subordinated clauses and so on, they kind of try to capture also the linguistic complexity of the structure of the sentence. And then of course, there are many different decisions you potentially take when designing your scale. Like as how many categories you would like to have. In this case, it's 11. Do you want to label all the categories on your scale? Or do you only want to partially label them or not label them at all? Would also be an option. So these are also things that you have to think about when designing your item. Also, do you want to have a don't know option? There are many more of these decisions that could potentially be interesting when thinking of designing a survey item. Notice that some of these choices are dependent on the study itself, like the domain and the concept. So that's the idea of your research study. What you want to measure is, let's say, fixed because it's dependent on your study. If you are interested in measuring political trust, well, that's a given. But there are still some things where you are relatively free, which is like how you want to formulate the item, how you want to design the response scale, and whether you want to have additional components like giving extra information, additional explanations, and so on and so forth. But why do we have to bother about all these decisions? So maybe some of you are already familiar with the 4-step model of how a respondent is going through the process of like seeing a question to answering a question. In the first step, of course, the respondent has to understand what you want from him or her. So it has to comprehend what it's about. In the second step, this person has to recall the information that is relevant for answering that particular question. And then in the third step, has to evaluate, based on the question, the information, and then somehow translate that into a response, into an answer on this particular scale for this particular question. So this is, I would say, quite a complex process. And all these decisions that we just talked about potentially influence how somebody is going through all these 4 different steps. And as such, it has not only an influence on the response behavior, but also on the quality. Or to put it differently, on the measurement quality, or phrased in the opposite way, the measurement error that you're possibly introducing when designing your instrument the way you're designing it. Now, let's assume you have carefully thought about your item. You have come up with like a very good version, but still there's so many different ways of how you could potentially measure it, right? Maybe there's another very good way of measuring the same thing. The key question here is, how do you decide which one of all these different questions, or call them also measurement methods, is the best in order to capture the concept that you are interested in? Consider this example. This is from the ESS round 3. It's supposed to capture immigration attitudes. Now, some questions about people from other countries coming to live in Britain. Now, using this card, to what extent do you think Britain should allow people of the same race or ethnic group as most British people to come and live here? Allow many to come and live here, allow some, allow a few, allow none. On the first side, I don't see anything like as a survey designer that says to me, oh, this looks like an awful question. Anyway, it was fielded in the ESS and there's a big expert team, so they probably also have put a lot of thought into it. But potentially you could have maybe also tried to measure the same thing with this version. Again, the same introduction, but now using this card, please say how much you agree or disagree with each of these statements. Britain should allow more people of the same race or ethnic group as most British people to come and live here. What you have here now is an answer scale with 5 points ranging from agree strongly to disagree strongly. And what has changed? I mean, very obviously, somehow the wording has changed and the answer scale has changed. This we can, I think, detect directly. But the question is, I guess, does it make any difference that in this way it's a little bit like this and there it's a little bit like that? Either way, the two things are trying to measure the same thing. And of course, I wouldn't be here today if I thought it didn't make any difference. So rhetorical question, yes. Maybe the better question is, what difference does it make? And I don't know whether you can see it from the back there. It's also not so important that you can read everything at the moment. What I just want to show here is that in the first column on the very left, you have all the different, some of the characteristics that might have an influence on the quality. And then you have here in the middle column, the codings for the first version of the item and here for the second version. So basically, the second blue row, for example, states number of categories, and it has a coding of 4 categories because it was a 4-point scale, in there 5 for 5-point scale. What I wanted to highlight is that there's this color coding, and the color coding basically highlights where the differences are between those two items. Whenever there's blue, there is a difference. Whenever there's orange, there's also a difference, but it's a, let's say, path-dependent difference in the coding. Another thing maybe to mention, here it says theoretical range of the concept, unipolar versus bipolar. And the first scale was ranging from basically allow none to allow many or something like this. Yeah, going from, let's say, 0 to a lot. So that's a unipolar measurement, a unipolar scale, just only goes one direction. And in the second case, we had dissatisfied and satisfied instead of saying no satisfaction and a lot of satisfaction. Yeah, so it's a bipolar scale. Also a main difference. And what difference does it make? Well, according to the survey quality predictor that we're going to look at later on, it does make a difference. I have a little bit bigger here so you can see it. The first item gets a quality prediction of 0.753 and the second of 0.602. Okay, what does that mean? It's just numbers. Of course, if you don't know what it could be possibly, what the range is, it doesn't tell you much. So 1 just means you measure perfectly what you want to measure. There is no measurement error. And basically, in most of the substantive research, I know people just assume that they measure perfectly what they want to measure. We know, of course, that this is not true. There's always measurement error. And these two are just predictions of what the measurement quality could be for those two items. So here, the conclusion would be the first version produces less measurement error than the second version. In order to understand maybe where these numbers come from or what they mean or what to do with them, let's take a closer look to the software or at the software itself. It is, yes, well, it stands for Survey Quality Predictor. It is, on the one hand side, an open access system for predicting the quality of continuous latent survey questions. And on the other hand, it's also a database of survey questions and then also information about their quality. This is not something that I'm trying to sell you now because I think it's a practical tool and we just are hosting it at GESIS. But I want to show you that this is actually something that is based on a lot of research that already started in the 80s. Saris and colleagues back then started conducting a series of multitrait-multimethod experiments. These are experiments in which you basically take a survey question and then you change something in the question. For example, the scale, instead of 5 points, you have 7 points or whatever, and you experiment with the way people then respond. You collect the data and depending on the design, then you can estimate the quality of these questions. And then they had the idea, okay, we know from the literature, from theory, that there are so many different characteristics that potentially have an influence on the quality. So let's code all these questions that were part of these experiments along some coding scheme that they developed and try to figure out how these characteristics of the question can predict the quality estimate. In the 80s, very simple. It was just a regression model, trying to see how we can explain the quality estimate with all these different characteristics. These MTMM experiments are useful, but they're also very difficult, difficult to conduct for you as a single researcher, let's say an individual researcher, because you need a lot of money, time. It's not so nice for the respondent. The person has to answer the same question several times and so on and so forth. So the idea really was here to come up with a very practical tool that allows you as an individual researcher who does not have the resources to conduct these experiments to still get some type of sense that is empirical based on the quality of your newly developed questions. This all was then put into the first SQP version already in 2001, back then programmed for DOS, and was based on an analysis of 87 of these MTMM experiments in English, German, and Dutch. A few years later, Willem Saris, Daniel Oberski, and Coopers, they made it available for Windows. Then in the beginning of the 2010s, the next version of SQP was released, SQP 2.0, with more than 250 of these MTMM experiments, which mainly were conducted within the context of the European Social Survey, now including 22 countries in 21 languages. They also received not only received an award, sounds now despective, I don't mean it like this, but they also received an award for this project. Then there was a tiny little update on the user interface, but the most important, at least from the perspective of today, the newest update was done in 2022. The software was hosted beforehand by the Universitat Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona, and then moved 2 years ago to GESIS here in Mannheim. And what we did is we took more of these MTMM experiments that were conducted in the ESS, so now it was more than 600, and we reanalyzed all of them and came up with a random forest machine learning prediction algorithm to now be able to predict the quality of survey items in 28 languages and 33 countries. And this is what is implemented in the SQP 3.0 version, which I'm going to show you in a bit. What you see here is a list of all the different characteristics that items can have that possibly influence the response behavior. I don't want to go through all the list here, but just to show you that all these characteristics are considered in the software, actually, and all these different characteristics, they also interact with each other. So it's not so in the way that you can say you always have to use bipolar scales because bipolar scales are better than unipolar scales, or presenting bipolar scales in a horizontal way and unipolar scales always in a vertical way is the best way to go. No, they all interact, and the software is trying to disentangle that for you. There are different types of characteristics. Some refer to the trait, so the thing that you want to measure itself. Could be, well, as I said already, the domain and concept, but could also be that maybe the thing that you're trying to measure is subject to social desirability. This could also be dependent on maybe the population you're asking. Then in what reference period you're asking the question about. Is it something the respondent has to refer to in present or in the future or in the past? So there are all these things and additional components maybe, such as giving instructions or definitions and so on. There's all these characteristics that refer to linguistic complexity, then to the formulation of the request. Am I asking in a direct way, in an indirect way? Am I using a WH word like who, when, where to ask my question? And all these kind of things. What does my response scale look like? Is it bipolar, unipolar? How many categories do I have? Do I have a don't know option? Do I have fixed reference points? And. So there's a long list. And then there's these things that refer to whenever the participant actually sees the question, such as in a web survey or in a paper and pencil questionnaire, that relate to the visual stimulus that the person gets. So, for example, receiving the scale horizontally or vertically. Maybe there's also a picture. Maybe there are values next to the scale label and so on, and how do they correspond maybe to the content of the labels. And then there's also the questionnaire context. Is there an interviewer present or not? That all might have an influence on the response behavior. From the program's perspective, these are now the 3 steps how the program was designed. So first of all the knowledge that existed up to that moment about the quality of survey questions. So basically these 600 MTMM experiments, which translates into more than 6,000 questions that were experimented with, were collected. These experiments were analyzed, the formal characteristics, so all the things that I just showed you on the slide before were coded for all of these 6,000 questions. And then we did something, it's not really a meta-analysis, but something similar to a meta-analysis of all these experiments with machine learning methods, and then the prediction algorithm that we derived. We also tested different models. But the best one we took and we implemented it in the software. From a user's perspective, so what you will be seeing in a moment, basically is that you enter into the software, into the website, you put in your question, and then you code your question. Yeah, you tell basically the program, like I always say, it's a little bit like the weather forecast. You have to tell the model something. In this case, you're not saying anything about temperature and humidity, but you say something about, is it a bipolar scale? Does it have an introduction, and so on and so forth. And then the model or the prediction algorithm, based on this analysis of the MTMM experiments, gives you a quality prediction, which is a product of reliability and validity as defined by Willem, Saris, and Andrews in their paper of 1999 based on the true score model. SQP is only one possible road that leads to Rome. There are many other methods, approaches, tools, whatever you want to call them, that are very helpful in designing a good question. And for sure, you need well, you don't necessarily maybe need web probing, but maybe you need an expert to take a look at your questions, or you need pretesting or cognitive pretesting to make sure that individuals understand what you think of when you write your question. Yeah, that's not very useful if you have a question on minorities and you think of immigrants, but your respondent thinks of elderly or of children or of something else. So this is something you cannot detect with SQP. SQP is not related to any like content things of the question. It's really only about the formal characteristics of the forming, the shaping of your measurement instrument. Yeah, you still need the other things to make sure you measure what you want to measure, but SQP is an addition to these tools to help you do it in the best way possible. You can use SQP in 3 different ways, I would say, or at least 3 different ways that are the main application areas, I would say. SQP can be used as a dictionary. So in the process of developing a questionnaire, you can look up questions, you can look up scales and so on. You can use it as an evaluation tool. So to get this quality prediction, maybe use this prediction to correct for measurement error in your substantive analyses. and you can use it as a translation check tool. Meaning that if you have the codings of maybe, let's say, your original item and the translated versions of your item, and all of them are coded, you can compare the codes and see whether there are differences between the language versions. So, SQP as a dictionary. What you see here is a screenshot of, once you have logged into the website, of the database, basically of the filtering of the database. You have here in turquoise the main filters, such as you can look for certain studies, whether the question is your own question or belongs to somebody else. You can look for languages, for countries in which the questions were fielded, and you can also look for what type of quality prediction they have. Next, you have the advanced filters. So you can also just put in some text. Say you're looking for something with important. You can type in important, and the database will give you everything that includes the word important, importante, whatever language includes this stem, yeah. And then you have this very, I find it actually quite fancy filter, which refers to the characteristic. So you could say, look for all the questions that have a bipolar scale, for example, and then it will give you those questions. So it's a searchable database. And maybe this is also a good moment to mention that, or to highlight, it is an open access project. And so whenever you sign up, you're also becoming part of this open idea. So you have an account, and whenever you add a question, the question is added to the entire database. So also other people can see your question. If you have a very sensitive question for a very sensitive project that you don't want anybody to know, this is not your tool, at least not in its current version. Maybe when we have, when we like reprogram it, maybe at some point in the future, we will have that option to maybe not show questions, but at the moment, everything you put in there is visible for everybody else, which is nice because also your questions becomes findable, yeah? So if you develop something for, I don't know, your PhD thesis or master thesis or whatever, and you want other people to be able to find your questions, they are in there, yeah? You don't have to register them anywhere, but they're in there. Here, I took a screenshot of just one example search, it's exemplary search. Here in the text filter, I put the word satisfied. For language, I chose English, and then for the range, I chose this characteristic range, and then I had to click on bipolar. I only wanted bipolar scales. Once you apply the filters, you have here a line which shows you which filters are active. So you can double check whether everything worked out. And then, I don't have it on the screen, on the slide now, but underneath you will have the database with all the questions that SQP found. This is one example, again, from the ESS. You might be wondering why I'm always talking about the ESS. It's basically because the ESS was conducting all these MTMM experiments. The ESS also used this tool in their development process of their questionnaires. They also used it for translation checks. So there is a strong cooperation and historical relationship, let's say, between SQP and the ESS. But I'm currently working on implementing more questions, which hopefully soon I can upload all the questions of the GESIS panel, of the question of the German longitudinal election study. If you have big surveys or whatever that you want to be in there, you can also always contact me, and we can see how we can import them in a more sophisticated way that you don't have to type in every question yourself. So just to let you know. So this is one example, and on the whole, how satisfied? Satisfied, okay, check. Are you with the way democracy works in Britain? The okay, use the same card. Here we have dissatisfied, here we have satisfied, so we have a bipolar scale. satisfied is mentioned, and it's an English item. Having said this, the filtering is based on all the codings. So let's assume there is one question in the database from the ESS. Maybe the ESS team has coded the question and it was turned by the SQP team into an authorized question. Yeah, it has then the label authorized. But like you see here, this is an authorized prediction. But then there's also the possibility for my prediction. Yeah, I can code a question here, but there could also be more of these rows with use, and that would be other users' predictions. And if another user has coded this question, but maybe incorrectly on one of these aspects, it will still be found by the filtering. So you still have to, I mean, never turn off your head anyway, as everywhere in life. But yeah, the filtering works. It's not a bug, but it could be that you find something else that is then because somebody else maybe mistakenly coded it as unipolar. So this is SQP as a dictionary. But, and this is maybe another interesting part of it, or one of the main interesting parts, you can use it as an evaluation tool. Maybe I change sides. Again, an item from the European Social Survey using this card. Do you think that most people would try to take advantage of you if they got the chance, or would they try to be fair? Most people would try to take advantage of me. Most people would try to be fair on a scale ranging from 0 to 10. Or look at this version. Do you think that most people would try to take advantage of you if they got the chance, or would they try to be fair? Choose your answer from this card. And then basically the answer options look the same as there, just that now it's a binary scale and not an 11-point scale anymore. And you can then, after coding these questions, compare the quality estimates. And again, you see here that the first item gets a higher quality prediction than the second item. So most probably what you would do is you would decide for the first version for your questionnaire. The third application area is SQP as a translation check tool. Especially or particularly in multilingual, but also cross-national surveys, the main aim or goal is that we want to keep the different versions we have as comparable as possible across languages and countries. And one way of trying to see whether that is the case is to code those questions by native speakers in these different language versions that you have. So the source item and the translated versions, and then compare afterwards. And what you might detect then is that there are differences in the coding. It could point to a potential error in the survey translation process. So survey translation is a very particular type of translation. Not many people are specialized on it. There are only a few experts. And if you just, let's say, in a PhD project, you just wanted to do it in 2 different ways, and you're just translating without having like knowledge about these like characteristics that make up a survey item, you might just translate and it looks to you fine, but maybe the quality of what you translated is not the same on the measurement level. And translators are not educated, or well, not educated, but I mean, they're not trained on looking out for these type of things. So potentially you could spot here those things. This is one possible explanation. The second possible explanation is that maybe in one language, the concept exists in a bipolar way, but maybe in the other language, it doesn't. Maybe there it's only a unipolar concept. So either then you start thinking, maybe I should just turn it into a unipolar concept for the both language versions or whatever, but it could point towards a potential problem maybe later on for data analysis once you have collected data. I have here one item in English from the United Kingdom and the Catalan version for Spain. The item reads, if a violent crime were to occur near to where you live and the police were called, how slowly or quickly do you think they would arrive at the scene? Choose your answer from this card, where 0 means very slowly and 4 means very quickly. And then you have the answer options, very slowly, rather slowly, neither slowly nor quickly, rather quickly, very quickly, and then all of it in Catalan. So my Catalan is not so good, but si succeis un delicte amb violència a prop d'on viu vostè i truquessin a la policia com de lent o ràpid, creu que arribaria al lloc del delicte, tri la resposta d'aquesta targeta, or something like that. To me, looks the same, more or less, yeah, from my basic understanding. Also, the answer categories look to me more or less the same. But if you go through the coding, you do see that there are some differences in the coding. Some of them refer not even to the, let's say, the measurement in the sense of like the formal characteristics, but are inherent to what you want to measure. So maybe it's something where social desirability is a little bit like a problem. Maybe in the other case it isn't. Could be that in the one country it's a more central topic for the respondent than in the other country or other societal context. There's apparently differences in the way the request was formulated. So in the English version, it was an interrogative way, and here was an imperative way, and so on and so forth. So these are things that, although on the first side they look the same, if you go more into the linguistic specificities of it, you might figure out that there are differences. In fact, in the end, the quality prediction is not that different, 0.664 and 0.613. What does it tell you? It tells you that there is a difference. Maybe the quality prediction here in that moment is not so interesting. It's really more about comparing the codes and figuring out where there are differences in the measurement instrument itself. Are there questions so far? Oh, yes.
Yeah, I have 2 questions. Like, first, the translation, is that based on coding? So if I have to code that the Catalan version also manually, and there I would realize that my codings are different based on the Catalan version. So it's not done by, I cannot feed SQP my question and it will like
Code it itself?
code it itself. No.
We are working on this right now,
Okay.
but not yet.
And the second question is like exactly what you ended with, basically. How, like, have you any measurement, like confidence intervals or anything, or to say how much different is like too different or like significantly different from each other?
Mm-hmm.
Or is that like more like, if it's, I don't know, in that case it's rather similar, so it could work, but if it were like 0.55, then it's too much. It's like, is there any any way to tell in that sense?
Yeah, the answer is not really. So there is not like 0.05 more is bad and the other way is good. It's always a decision that every time you have to reevaluate yourself. So when I go in the software in a moment, you will see that there's also something which is called interquartile range, which is trying to get a little bit at the idea of confidence intervals. This is also why we chose a random forest model to get this type of information. But yeah, it depends on the models that are implemented, what we can show and what not.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have 3 questions.
Yes.
And the first one, I mean, concerns directly this case. Is the goal here to reach the same quality value? Because in the end, there are, okay, the question is about the same topic, but obviously there are 2 distinct cultures, 2 distinct languages. So, you know, the one was stated, when you go 1 slide back, it was an interrogative question, and the other one was stated a little differently. Maybe, I mean, it's the goal to like adjust it to the culture.
Yes, yeah. How can I respond to that in a good way? There's different parts to it. So one thing is that there are, of course, different. So no, let's start from the first question. Is the goal to have the same estimate there? No, it's not the goal. Actually, in the case of translation checks, you can, let's say, even forget about this quality estimate for a moment, because it's really more about this year. And then you can check and say, yeah, but in this context, it was not translated incorrectly. It's just that's the way you have to say it in that culture, in that language. Maybe, I don't know, English is more polite than German. So if I ask the same way in English, maybe respondents will not be very happy and not and break off the survey. So it's also not necessary that you have the same codings everywhere, but you could use it as a tool for checking whether somewhere there could be potentially a problem or mistake in the translation. And the point with being adaptive or not adaptive, so there's so many different like philosophies in translation, whether you try to like really measure the same thing in the same way or be adaptive to the culture and language. And if now our translation experts were here, they would say it's not so black and white, it's more gray, there may more gray tones. Yeah, but the answer is no, the idea is not here to match the same quality estimate or prediction, but really to have a tool to check.
See the differences.
To see the differences, because maybe if afterwards you have collected your data and you want to check for measurement equivalence, and you realize one country behaves strangely for this particular item, maybe you could code it and you find a difference, maybe also in the formulation, that then the measurement instrument was used differently by the respondents.
Okay. And then the second question is, you mentioned that there might be some items that are that have been mistakenly coded. I wonder, I mean, how high is the risk of having a mistake-inflated database then? Are they being deleted or somehow?
No, so there is, I will also show you in a moment when we are in the software itself. So there are different, let's call them maybe batches. Yeah, these icons that I showed you at some point. Whenever there is an authorized coding, you can be pretty sure that it is double checked.
Okay.
But it's human-made coding, there can always be some mistake. The other users' codings, you don't know who coded the question because it becomes part of this open database, but it's still anonymous. So you cannot know. And these ones will also not be deleted because maybe you're trying different ways of coding it, and then for the moment not. But what we are working on is we are trying to find a way to move away from this manual coding to an automized coding in the future with machine learning and large language models and so on. So hopefully then we will have also all these large language model based or whatever predictions or codings in there. Yeah.
Okay, and then the third question is, but I don't know whether it's not like too much to ask now. Would you say, or could you say, which questions are really not suitable to check with this tool?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Factual questions. Questions that are observable, like demographics, like behaviors, but everything that is attitudes, opinions, everything that is not directly observable and in theory a continuous concept, you can check with it. But if you were like trying to check a very good question, thank you, and I didn't pay you for it. If you were to check, let's say, whether a question for gender or for age or year of birth or so, would work, and you would code it in here, you would get a quality estimate that is way too low. Because people usually know their year of birth, generally speaking, maybe even better than their age. This is getting more and more difficult, becoming older. But so for those questions, it's not meant to be. It also has been used in the past, unfortunately, in the wrong way exactly for those items, but it's particularly not for that. It's really attitudes, opinions, continuous, latent, not observable variables.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So a question from somebody online. On SQP, some questions qualities are rated as -1 by
Yes.
users. What does it mean?
Perfect. Relates directly to that. I just had it in my mind, but I forgot to mention it. Somebody already checked the software. So -1 means that somebody coded the question as being a factual question. Then there was a message saying, SQP is not meant to be for questions that are factual questions or background variables. You can keep coding, but you will not get a quality estimate. So the -1 is just the way how we implemented that this is not an actual quality estimate. So for this question, it's not possible, but still could be that somebody is interested in coding the question for translation checks. So it could still make sense, but we just don't want that the person relies on a completely wrong quality estimate. So we implemented -1.
Another similar question. What is the lowest quality estimate that is still acceptable? Does it depend on the question?
It depends on the question and it depends on what you want to do with it, I would say. So some of these, so there are all these different characteristics and some of them are inherent to the topic itself. Yeah, and if there is social desirability and so on and so forth, so you cannot do anything about it. What you could do about it, what you could do potentially is if you were doing an analysis and you wanted to correct for measurement error, you could take this estimate and then try to correct for it in your substantive analysis. So does that answer the question sufficiently? Yeah. Okay.
Maybe one last question for item batteries. So
Yeah.
quite often there's a question of how do people feel about economy, and then in the survey would ask 3 different questions relating to the economy. Is there any way that in SQP you could find that like item battery reliability score, or
For the entire
for the
battery.
battery? So as I understand, SQP would only then like take these individual questions individually. So there's no
it's
option.
of item level.
And there's no like note or anything that this question is possibly part of an item battery or of a larger latent variable.
You would see in the coding, because there is one characteristic saying, or now I don't know the exact phrasing, but something like, is there a statement in the request for an answer, statement or phrase? I don't know. I will check in a moment. Is it here, maybe? No, it's not here. And then you have the answer options of saying yes or saying, or for example, sometimes there's not a real request anymore because the batteries are treated in a way that the actual question, so the request for saying, how much do you agree or disagree with the following statements, this would only be introduced for the very first item. The second, third, fourth, fifth item will not have this request anymore, because in theory, the participant does not read this again, right? So usually you read it once and then you go down, you cross the next, the police, the justice system, the government. So this is not part of it anymore. And you can see it in the coding. You can see in the coding that this is probably part of a battery, but not the first item. And then you have more information in SQP, so then you could, I think, easily identify these other ones. But for the moment, it's not implemented that there is like secret sign saying there are 5 more items that belong to this. And then with reference to the quality estimate for these bigger constructs, let's say, depends also on whether it's formative or reflective indicators. And then there are different formulas of coming up with a quality estimate based on the individual estimates. Yep. Okay. So I have no idea, as I don't see any time here. Okay. When I'm switching now to here, this can be seen now. Yes. Okay. Okay. I have to sit down now. Okay. So what you see here, see the mouse is working. Okay. What you see here is the landing page of SQP. If you want to follow what I'm doing, now would be a good moment, if you haven't done so already, to either create a user account or to log in. You have here the access button on top. If you wanted to register, you would go to register. And then it basically only asks you for a username. This username will not be visible to anybody else. The only thing is that you will be assigned some type of number, and this ID will be shown, but not your username that you pick. So this is just for you when you log in, what you use for logging in. Then your email address, first name, last name, you choose a password, and you have to accept the privacy policy and the conditions of use. Why do you have to do it? You have to do it in order to fully experience all the different things that are in SQP, but it's completely for free. And like this, you create a user account, you can add questions, you can code them, and it saves it to your account so you can later relate to it again. Okay, so once you have done this, you go to log in. I have so many different accounts now that I have to check if this is the right one. Yes. Okay. Because I want to show it to you from the user's perspective. I also have an administrative account, but then it looks a little bit different. Okay. So this is what you saw in the beginning on one of the slides. That is the main page that you enter once you have logged in. It's the database. You have here these filters, and maybe now you're wondering, where are these advanced filters that I showed you earlier, the text filter and the characteristics filter? It's a little bit hidden. There's here this little arrow. If you click on this arrow, this opens, and then you do have these filters. So also, whenever you chose a filter, you have to click on apply filters. But so scrolling farther down, what you see here now is the beginning of the database. I think it's always like 20 questions or something like this that are shown before you can, in theory, go to the next page. What you see down here is that currently there are almost 72,000 questions in the database. I have currently prepared like 30 or 40,000 more, but I'm still waiting for them to get imported. So soon it should hopefully increase. You see here always the question name, which consists of 3 parts. The first part, A1 here in this case, refers to the name the question has in the questionnaire. So if your first question is called 1, then it would say 1 here. Then the next thing is the name you would probably assign this question in your data set later on, once you have collected data. And then the third part is the concept that is being measured. And we do all of these namings in English so that everybody, no matter what language in theory, could look for it and find it. Then you have the study name, you have the language, the country, and here you already see that there are different icons. The A stands for, here on top you have the legend for authorized coding, the O stands for other users' codings, and if you had coded it yourself already, there would be this M. If you click on one of these questions, like this one here, maybe this person who just asked the question opened also the first question, which has a -1 as a quality prediction. This is because this item is about the weekly consumption of TV. So in theory, something you could potentially observe. So we don't want to give you a quality prediction. Yeah, you see here also on the side a few other icons. The eye, when you click on it, will show you again here the question with the answer options, and then everything you have here in this I'm scrolling down for a moment just for you to see that these are all these different characteristics, yeah, that I talked about earlier, and their particular coding. The question was called A1, was from the European Social Survey. It also is position number 1 in the European Social Survey in that particular questionnaire. Yeah, okay, so. Well, what you also, wait, now I was too quick. Referring back to your question earlier, in theory, there's also the interquartile range shown here, but because we don't want to give a prediction, it's not applicable. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah.
One more question. On the media use, like, is there any option to see what kind of categories are in there, like in the SQP in general? Because I was just looking, and I can, if I type in the text field media use, I can actually see all the questions on media use. But is there any option to see what kind of categories, like the names that are used? Because like maybe I would be interested in media use, but I wouldn't know the exact wording you used in SQP.
So when
maybe I would put in media usage, which then would not allow me to find the media use category.
Okay, so we do not have such an overview, but what I would do then as a searching strategy in SQP would think of what would the item look like? And if in your item, what would the potential item look like? In your case, if you say media usage, you would be interested in
how often do people watch TV?
TV. Okay, so then maybe you would type in TV in the text filter, apply filter, and then get there. Yeah, and then you get those that include TV in here, but you could potentially also find things that are, I mean, I don't know, maybe TV now is also part of other things, but potentially could be that within the question somewhere there is also TV, which I don't know whether this is the case here now. But let's say, so I looked at a few, or I prepared a few examples to go through with you. Is let's assume that you wanted to look for, which by the way, you're on the tablet or on the phone? Right. It's not optimized for phones. Just saying, just saying. Because I used to always put the QR code and I thought it's not so good because people try to enter with their phone and it's not optimized for phones. Yeah, it's because it's just too complex to put it on a screen of a phone. So let's say we are in the first phase of like trying to find questions or constructing our survey, and we wanted to measure something that includes the word likely, yeah, some type of likelihood. Maybe the answer scale should have something with likely, and I would put here in the text filter likely. I cannot just hit the enter button. I really have to click on the apply filters in order for the filtering to work. And now I probably have questions. Let's click on this one here. Here, this one includes likely in the text or in the in the question, but also in the answer options. But I could also have here questions where likely is already included in the concept itself. Yeah, so it also finds it doesn't matter where exactly it is. When we take, for example, D47, German, Austria. I don't know whether everybody here can speak German, but the important, I think you will still get what I'm trying to get at here. You see that the answer options here, yeah, even though I looked for likely, but because it was part of the concept, I also got a German version which captures the idea of likely. And I see here that they phrase it as gar nicht wahrscheinlich, wenig wahrscheinlich, eher wahrscheinlich, sehr wahrscheinlich, so as not likely at all, little likely, rather likely, and very likely. If now I compare it with the other German versions that they are, let me filter also for German, because there is another version for Swiss. Wait, I cannot talk and look at the same time. Sorry. You could or you could compare the Swiss, the Austrian, and the German version with each other. Yeah, so this is what we just looked at. That's the Austrian version. Can I make it smaller so you see both? Yeah. The German version for Germany states überhaupt nicht wahrscheinlich, which maybe is still similar to gar nicht wahrscheinlich, okay. But then nicht sehr wahrscheinlich is already quite different than wenig wahrscheinlich. Wahrscheinlich is also different from eher wahrscheinlich. And then sehr wahrscheinlich, which this again agrees with the other one. And if you also take a look at the Swiss version, which is the same as the version for Germany, but you get the feeling that even in such a big survey project like the ESS, although it's the same language, there are different versions for the same scale. And well, I don't want to discuss this, but I just wanted to show you that even here you can find different versions. And if you are maybe coming up with an item that you created yourself and you think, oh, how can I name these different categories on my scale? And I cannot think of something, or this is not good, maybe I need another idea. You can really use this database to look for alternative versions. I always found it very useful. So this is one thing, but let's say you wanted to find different scale versions with likely. We could also change the filter from German to English now, maybe to make it a little bit better for everybody. And we choose country. Oh, wait, I first have to apply filter English so that I get all the countries again. Yeah, okay. I choose United Kingdom. So I have activated now the language filter English, United Kingdom as a country, and in the text likely. And now I'm curious, for example, here, they have a version with very likely, likely, not very likely, or not at all likely. Maybe I go to D47. It is almost the same, just they reversed it in their example. Or I had here, for example, this version, an 11-point scale ranging from extremely unlikely to extremely likely. So I could just get it or use it as an inspirational tool to come up with whatever the scale or the way I want to label my scale. Then it could be that I found a scale that I want to use, but I want to use it also in other languages, potentially to stay with the this example, maybe the D47. Let me maybe clear the filters for a second and filter for it separately. So if I already know, because now I prepared, I want to take a look at the question D47. That was part of the European Social Survey. I can also write it in here. Oh, ESS, European Social Survey, round 4. And then apply filters. I have now this item in all these different language versions here, and I could say now, okay, I have here my version that we just looked at in German. If I wanted to do it in French, a possible translation could be this one. I don't have to invent it myself. And well, whatever. I mean, Russian, I cannot read Russian, so I cannot read it out now to you. But I mean, there's like Hebrew, Arabic, English, Hungarian, Greek, French, Finnish. Yeah, so it is a potential tool for researching items and scales. Okay, so another thing I wanted to show you, because unfortunately it's not enough time to show you how to code one item because it would take too long. But what I can show you is how you can add a question and replicate a question that already exists in the database. So let's assume you wanted to take one of these items that already exists here, replicate it and change it maybe a little bit and then code it again or something like this, yeah? So what you would do is either if you wanted to add a new question on the very bottom, on all the pages, you always find this here, add a question. If you click on it, a mask will open and you can type in your question. But I don't want to do that now. I want to use already a question that exists with you. And I had prepared one, which now I'm wondering, I did not write down from which original study that was. Oops. But that was D14. But it was not, I think it was round 5. Yes, okay. The English, and let's filter directly for the English version. By the way, if you happen to click like me all the time on these arrows, you have to click in here. Yeah, I find it a little bit irritating in the software, but you have to click here. So, for example, here we have the English version. This is what you've already seen earlier on one of my slides. Is one example. If a violent crime were to occur near to where you live and the police were called, how slowly or quickly do you think they would arrive at the scene, and so on and so forth. So you've already heard this. If you now wanted to replicate it, you just click here on the button, replicate. Now that's what I'm doing. I replicate. What it wants you to do then is you need to assign this to a study. So to fill in all the fields of the database. In this case, I already prepared a study for today. I called it SQP workshop. Yeah, which I called SQP workshop, and you would add it to that particular study. If there is no, if you want to replicate it and add it somewhere, you first have to create that study if it doesn't already exist. But yeah. And then you could already take the authorized prediction with you, so you can replicate the question directly with the codings in case there are already codings existent. And we will do that now as well. Click on continue. And I can here see again all these questions. Yeah. Now I'm wondering whether I deleted it yesterday. I think I did. I will call this because for the sake of the exercise, what I would like to do is with you, we have here this 11-point scale, and I would like to try to figure out with you what happens if I change the number of scale points with the quality prediction. So we will do that a few times, and in order to be able to know which one is which, I just call it 11 PTS, like 11 points. Yeah. The rest I just leave as it is, and I save the question. Okay, I see somebody online also did the exercise with me. This is nice to see. So now I have this question created. I see here an M for my quality prediction. This is basically the quality prediction that I just stole or borrowed already from the authorized prediction. Now, what I would like to do next is we have now this original item in here in our study, and now I would like to do it again, but change it and turn it into a 5-point scale. So I don't have to go back to the original one. I can just replicate the item I already have in here. So I click replicate. I select my study. SQP workshop, continue, and then I call it 5 PTS. And now what of course I have to change here is also Now my answer scale will be different. Oops. So I'm changing here the answer options. And I'm also adapting it here in my text, right? So then it would range from 0 to 4 with my 5-point scale. And I save. Okay. This is the question I just created, but you see here next to my quality prediction, there's no quality prediction. There's the option, clicking here, and I would have to go through the coding myself. Yeah. One important thing is, so this is the first characteristic I would go through. I would have to change here whatever I think the question is measuring, so on and so forth. But on the bottom, you always have an orange box explaining to you what this characteristic means and what the codings mean, so you can take an informed decision when coding. But we're not doing this because it takes too long. Now, wait, can I just go back? Wait. There is no going back. SQP wants you to code. Oh. Okay, so now I got thrown out, but I can, wait, I can maybe show you this as well. If I go to the dashboard, I don't see that. Somehow it looks now different. I don't know what happened. Maybe I created the study with my other user account. Okay, so if you had created the study yourself, you could see in the dashboard all the studies you created yourself and could go there directly. Okay, in this case, we just filter for the study. SQP workshop. I go here, apply filters. Okay, now I'm back to my 5-point scale. I don't have any coding yet, and I don't want to go through the process of coding. So what I can do is I go to the one of the 11-point version, and I have here more options. And one of them is copy coding. So I click on this icon here, which says copy coding. My SQP informs me that I copied a coding and that now I have to select the destination. I can also cancel the copying process if I click here, if I clicked accidentally on it. And then it offers me here the actions. In this case, I want to copy it into the item I just created, the 5 points. I click here. It will say that it will overwrite the current coding. Okay, overwrite current coding. There is no coding, so no problem. Continue. Did I click on the right one? Yes. Okay, so now it is calculating the quality prediction, which now is the same, obviously, as for the 11-point scale because the coding is the same. And I know already the coding scheme quite well, so I know what I would have to adapt here because I didn't change so many things. But one thing that I have to definitely change in my coding is the number of categories. Yeah, so I click here on number of categories, and instead of 11, I put in 5. I click continue, and the prediction is being calculated again. Okay, so now I have a quality prediction for the version with 5 points. I want to do it one more time with you with 4 points. You can maybe already start thinking about what will change as well, because it's not only the number of categories that is going to change now, but actually more characteristics of the scale. If they change from 11 or from 5 to 4. I leave you with that for a moment. Yeah, I have to click there in database. Program is unfortunately a little bit slow. There we are. And it threw me out again. Okay, so SQP workshop. Apply filters. It's a good way to get to know all the filters here. So I'm now replicating this item. I'm adding it to my study. Click continue. I call it now 4 points. It always automatically adds underscore copy. Yeah, whenever you copy a thing automatically, if you want to rename it, you have to rename it. Okay, so now we take out this here, we adapt our text and we save. Okay, again, no quality prediction. So I go to the item before, for example, I click again here on this symbol, which is copy coding. And now here I'm in the 4-point scale, I paste it in this item. Yes, create a new coding. And the prediction is being calculated. Okay, while it's calculating, oh, there it is. The prediction, of course, now it's the same quality prediction because I didn't change anything. The first obvious thing is I have to change the number of categories, right? So now it's 4 and not 5. Continue. But any idea what might have changed as well? Yeah?
We have no middle category anymore.
We have no middle category anymore, exactly. And this translates actually in 2 different characteristics in SQP. One is the question of whether there's a neutral category, which now I have to find in here. Just a second, or I just look for it. There it is. So the neutral category disappeared, so I have to say not present. It's recalculating. And a second thing that relates to not having this neutral category is also the number of fixed reference points changes. A fixed reference point in theory is something that should be understood the same way by all the respondents. Yeah. And the neutral category in the middle is seen as such. And as soon as it's not there anymore, there's also one fixed reference point less. So number of fixed reference points. I have to change now from 3 to 2. And then I have changed all the characteristics that needed to be changed. Yeah.
And the other ones were the extreme categories.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. So now I go to database. I have here my 3 different versions, the 11-point scale, the 5-point scale, the 4-point scale. And you see here for the first one, it's 0.675. The next one is 0.669, so it's going down. And 0.664, it's also good. So maybe again about the question, whether there is like this value, I can tell you what makes up a good question and what doesn't. So it's not so much about this value is a good value, but you see here a tendency. And this is also, in fact, in line with theory that you would say, okay, if you reduce the answer categories in that case, also this respondent doesn't have so much possibility anymore to differentiate, right? So this is one way. Then just one last thing I want to show you before I go back to the slides, because I think we have 10 minutes left, yeah, is how you compare code. And I will just stay here with this example now. There is here this other icon on the side, which is compare code, and you just click on it. And then you click on whatever other question you want to compare it with. The symbol here appears. Click on it, and then you get the view I showed you on the screenshots earlier for like comparing different language versions and so on. You could, of course, also compare other things. So here, not so many things are different because we only changed 3 different characteristics, but this is one way of comparing it. You also have the option of downloading this coding as a CSV file, which I think is also nice. Okay, are there questions about this at the moment? If not, yeah.
But no matter how low we go with the answer categories, it would always assume that it's continuous, the variable. Did I understand that correctly? Because earlier you said that SQP only works for continuous variables.
Yeah. So the idea is that the thing that you're trying to measure is a continuous thing.
Okay.
But you could potentially measure a continuous thing in a binary way. Yeah.
Okay.
But let's say you would reduce it to 2 answer categories. Then you would have to change here something else in the coding, which refers here response scale, basic choice. What I have here is more than 2 category scales. So there is also one option to say it's a binary scale. And then there's some follow-up things that then will not appear anymore. Yeah. Something else? Yeah.
Coding, actually, when you code these from scratch, do you have to code every characteristic always? Or can you also omit, and it would still give it a prediction?
You cannot omit anything, but some of them are path dependent. So if, for example, you don't have, these questions now didn't have an introduction, but if you have an introduction, it will also ask you how many sentences are in the introduction. I mean, it counts automatically, but I mean, there's certain things that then do not appear anymore. Currently, you cannot omit anything, but we're working on a more optimized process. I know it looks a lot now, and it might be overwhelming. From experience, I can say that coding maybe one question for the first time takes 1 hour approximately. But for one question, but this has to do with the fact that you're not familiar yet with the coding scheme, and you have to read what it means, and you have to read the help screens, and then but the learning curve is very steep. I promise, it's very steep. I have in my PhD, I have coded so many questions in SQP for the ESS German, Austrian versions and old experiments. At some point, you do it in 5 minutes, one question. If it's an item battery, even quicker. And now with these functions of copying and pasting code, it's even quicker. So especially if you have an item battery, many of the characteristics will change. But it makes sense to do it a few times with an item the complete way so that you know which characteristics will change. Because maybe you have this item battery, and you think of, well, actually everything stayed the same, but maybe the number of syllables is a different one. And that is also something that is accounted for here. So yeah, it looks overwhelming, but it is not. After trying it a few times, it's not so overwhelming anymore. And hopefully in future, it will be optimized completely. So, okay. Repke is coming, okay. All right, so let me switch back to the slides now. God, now I cannot see where I have to click. What is the combination of the keys, do you know? Or can I move this? No.
And click OK, I think.
Okay, then it's gone. You did not tell me this before. Okay, sorry, you had to see this the entire time. And it. Okay, I can work with it. Okay, so some final words I wanted to say. I suppose this will go down in a second. I don't know.
Oh,
no?
Good.
More
Okay.
lights high.
Yeah,
More,
go ahead. You're probably quicker.
more and hide. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, okay, battery still works. Isn't it good? Now let's just see. Yeah, okay. So I wanted to highlight some limitations. About some of them we have already talked. Thank you for this good question earlier. So SQP is really only meant to predict survey questions that measure continuous latent variables. So this means please do not try to predict the quality of factual or observable questions such as demographics, facts, and behavioral questions. You can still use it for those questions if you're just interested in the codes and differences of codes, but it will not give you a quality prediction, or it will be -1. The second thing is it is one tool among many other different approaches that you can use in the questionnaire development process. It does not substitute pretesting or things like that, especially if they refer like to testing the understanding of the content. It's meant really only for formal characteristics. It is also a program, so an empirical program based on evidence. that at the moment is only aimed at prediction and not at explanation. So at the moment, currently we cannot say, because you have this prediction, no, you should change X, Y, Z to get a better prediction. We don't know, but maybe in the future we develop different models, can implement them, and then maybe we get also there. And it is limited to the type of questions that were part of the MTMM experiments. I introduced you the must know feature, so you can search the database, you can add your own questions, code them, then get the quality prediction, you can compare codes, and you can also download codings. So summing up, SQP, yes, is this open access prediction system for continuous items, but it is also a very much like searchable database that you can use for designing questionnaires. So there are also these at least three main areas of application, which is the questionnaire development process, the evaluation of the question quality, and all this area of translation checks. Yeah, so I hope I took you into the dive of SQP's world, and now I want to dive out with you again to highlight that it is not just a software, but really a big research project, a big ongoing research project. So if you now feel inspired, there is a lot of data from these MTMM experiments that we have, all these codings of the questions. If you're interested in researching, I don't know, the interaction of bipolar scales in a horizontal or vertical format or whatsoever, we probably have data that if you wanted to analyze this data, feel free to contact us here at sqp@gesis.org. There is really so much possibilities to collaborate and tons of data to analyze for papers. I also, talking to one of my precious colleagues who was also involved in this project for a really, really long time and who I think just joined the session. I created a slide with all the, not with all the pictures, but with all the pictures I could find of people that at some point were involved in the project. Yeah, and I still miss people because there were names I'm not sure they have an internet profile or anything. So, but these are some of these colleagues. And again, it's a big research project. It is a tool that I think is very practical to use within the process of developing a questionnaire. But there's also still room for improvement and for developing it further. So if you feel inspired, please get in contact with us. Thank you.
Very much for this very insightful workshop on SQP, which concludes our today's Social Science Data Lab. The next event will be an input talk by Olga Kononunkina from LMU Munich about using AI tools for research on April 17th. So thank you all and see you next time.